here we are, week 3. Time's moving along pretty quickly. We have a couple things to go over this week, so I'm going to make it quick, but let's do this. So let me start this week a little differently. Instead of jumping straight into concepts, I want you to think about a situation you've probably been in more than once. You're sitting in a command staff meeting, something just happened. It could be an incident, could be a policy issue, something that's getting attention. Phones are going, social media is already moving, and someone from the city leadership has already started, what are we doing about this? And then the room does what it always does. Now, when I say it does what it always does, what does that mean? Well, we start working the problem. Let's get the press conference together. Let's release the body cam. Let's slow this down. All solid reactions. But here's the part that's easy to miss. We jump straight into action. And I know this from 40 years of doing this. Cops like to get to the root of the matter and take action. The diagnostics, maybe a little light, but action all the time. And I've seen this over and over again at the command level. We get really good at answering the question, what should we do? But we don't always stop and ask, what problem are we actually trying to solve? Now think about that. What problem are we actually trying to solve? Because they're not the same thing. And if the problem is framed wrong, even slightly, you can make all the right moves and still end up in the wrong place. So that brings us to our first topic for this week, which is dialogue versus debate. Now layer this in for a second. Think about how most of these conversations go. Whether it's internal or it's out in the community, they turn into debates pretty fast. People come in with positions. They defend them. They push for a solution. Nothing unusual about that, but it also limits what you actually learn. What you'll see in the first video is a different approach. Less about winning the argument and more about actually understanding what's underneath it. So let's go to that video and I'll be back in a few minutes.
Let's talk about a better way to handle tough conversations, especially when it comes to public safety. Does this feel familiar? You go to a community meeting and it just makes things worse, not better. And in that tension, a lot of people feel like their voices aren't even being heard. You know, the research actually backs this up. The old way just doesn't work. Here's the thing, the problem isn't just what we're talking about, it's how we're talking. Most public meetings are set up for a debate, a battle. But the alternative is dialogue. Debate is all about proving you're right. Dialogue, that's about figuring out what's right together. Okay, so how do we get there? Well, it starts by looking past what's on the surface. A position is what someone says they want. It's the demand you hear in an argument. But under that is the interest, the real reason why, and that's where you find common ground. Go even deeper, and you find universal needs and fears. This is where we really connect. This whole model helps you see the person, not just their argument. It's a total game changer. So how do we actually do this? Well, there's a practical 2-stage process for it. First is dialogue. You're not deciding anything yet. You're just building that foundation of understanding. The whole goal here is just to learn, explore, and really get on the same page. Once you have that understanding, then you can move on to making smart decisions together. Okay, so what can you do? Here are a few things to try in your own community. These 3 keys are absolutely crucial. They help turn an argument into a real collaboration. And here's a super powerful tool that the pros use. It's called reframing. See that shift? You're not shutting them down, you're inviting them to find a solution. So, what if the key to a safer community isn't another fight, but a truly better conversation?
So our next topic, we're going to talk a little bit about framing, which is another primary topic for this week. Now here's the second piece, that once you see it, you won't unsee it. Every time someone in that room says, here's what the situation is. Now I want you to think about that. Here's what the situation is. They're putting a frame around it. And framing drives everything that follows. Call it a discipline issue, and you head in one direction. Call it a training issue, you'll head in another direction. Call it a trust issue, and you're now in a completely different conversation. Think about that. We're talking about the same facts, different interpretation, and different outcomes. So as you go into the second quick video about framing, think about how that matters. Back soon.
Okay, so let's talk about framing. Ever wonder why some ideas just take off while others don't? Well, it almost always comes down to one single thing: how the idea is framed. You've probably seen it happen. A really important message just gets totally lost in translation. And the answer isn't to just speak louder. It's about building a much better frame. Think of a frame like a guide. It points people where to look and helps them make sense of things. I love this idea of a mosaic. It's not one big thing, it's built piece by piece. Literally every choice you make, what to emphasize, what to skip, all of it builds your frame. So let's build out your toolkit with 12 essential elements, starting with the message blueprint. These first 4 are the core structure: context, explanatory chains, order, and narrative. First, context. This is what zooms you out from a single person to the bigger picture. Explanation chains are great. They connect the dots for your audience, from cause to effect. Next up is order. And this is so important. What you say first primes everything that follows. And finally, narrative. These are the stories that, told over and over, literally shape our culture. All right, next up are the power-ups. These add some real persuasive force to your blueprint. Leading with shared values is a great way to invite people into common good thinking. Your tone also matters a ton. An aspirational one unites people, an argumentative one divides. And remember, the messenger is often just as important as the message itself. Trust is key. And you should always, always highlight the solutions. It gives people that can-do feeling. Now, numbers are great for grabbing attention, but you've got to be careful with them. See, they really need words to give them meaning. Never just let a number hang there by itself. And don't forget about other cool tools like metaphors and examples to make things concrete. So when you put this all together, what's the goal? To shift from individual blame to systemic solutions. You've got the tools now, so the only question is, what conversation will you reframe?
So in closing, as you go through this week, don't overcomplicate it. Just bring it back to your own experience. Think about a situation your agency dealt with recently and ask yourself honestly, how did we define the problem and did we get that part right? Because at this level, leadership isn't always about decisions you make at the end. A lot of times it's about the moment early on when someone sets the direction by saying, hey, here's what this is. That moment matters more than most people realize. I think this is an interesting week. It starts to get us around the idea of how important the relationship is between how we frame issues and how we create the dialogue to better understand, to define the issues. I think we have a pretty good breakout session ahead this week, and I look forward to seeing all of you in the live session. Take care.